What would you do if Elon Musk suddenly walked into your local diner? For the patrons of a small Minnesota eatery, this wasn't a hypothetical question. It was their reality. As the bell above the door chimed, heads turned to see the billionaire entrepreneur standing in the entrance. Forks clattered onto plates, and conversations halted mid-sentence. The air crackled with disbelief and excitement. What brought Elon Musk to this unassuming spot, and what happened next? The aroma of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air at Marge's diner, a cozy spot nestled in the heart of small-town Minnesota. It was a typical Tuesday morning, with the usual cast of characters settling into their favorite booths and stools. The clinking of silverware and murmur of friendly chatter created a comforting backdrop to the start of another day. Behind the counter, Doris, the veteran waitress, poured coffee with practiced ease, exchanging playful banter with the regulars. Her apron, slightly stained from years of service, told stories of countless meals served and friendships forged. In the kitchen, Mike, the cook, flipped pancakes with a rhythmic precision, his movements a well-choreographed dance honed over decades. At the corner booth, old friends Tom and Jerry engaged in their daily ritual of solving the world's problems over steaming mugs of coffee. Their laughter echoed through the diner, drawing smiles from nearby patrons. A few tables over, Sarah, a young college student, furiously typed on her laptop, fueled by bottomless refills and the comforting hum of diner life. The warm atmosphere inside stood in stark contrast to the gray, drizzly day beyond the windows. Raindrops pattered against the glass, creating a cozy cocoon that seemed to insulate the diner from the outside world. Yet, as the morning wore on, a subtle shift in energy began to ripple through the air. It was almost imperceptible at first, like the faintest whisper of change on the wind. In her office, diner owner Marge glanced at the day's receipts with a satisfied nod. Business had been steady, and she felt grateful for her loyal customers. Still, a nagging feeling tugged at the back of her mind. Something felt different today, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. As the lunch rush approached, the diner's rhythm picked up pace. Doris hustled between tables, her order pad a flurry of scribbled requests. Mike's spatula flew faster, keeping up with the mounting tickets. The air grew thick with the mingled scents of burgers, fries, and homemade pie. Suddenly, the bell above the door chimed, cutting through the diner's comfortable cacophony. A hush fell over the room as heads turned toward the entrance. Even Tom and Jerry's animated discussion ground to a halt. Sarah's fingers froze over her keyboard. In that moment of suspended animation, a customer in the far corner slowly looked up from his newspaper, his eyes widening in disbelief at the figure silhouetted in the doorway. As the silhouette in the doorway stepped into the light, jaws dropped and eyes widened. The unmistakable figure of Elon Musk stood there, looking as out of place as a rocket ship in a cornfield. For a moment, it felt like everyone in the diner had forgotten how to breathe. The smell of coffee and bacon faded into the background as all attention fixed on the billionaire. Elon Musk, dressed in a simple black t-shirt and jeans, scanned the room with curious eyes. His slightly disheveled hair and the faint shadows under his eyes hinted at a long day of work. Yet there was an unmistakable energy about him, a spark of brilliance that seemed to electrify the air around him. The diner erupted into a flurry of hushed whispers and not-so-subtle pointing. Old Tom nearly choked on his coffee, while Jerry's fork clattered noisily onto his plate. Sarah, the college student, fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she tried to snap a discreet photo. A few booths down, a family of 4 sat frozen, their half-eaten meals forgotten. Doris, the veteran waitress, stood rooted to the spot, coffee pot suspended in mid-pour. Her eyes darted between Musk and Marge, silently pleading for guidance. In the kitchen, Mike peeked through the order window, his spatula hanging limply at his side. Musk seemed both aware and slightly amused by the stir he was causing. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth as he made his way further into the diner. His gaze swept over the worn Formica tables and the vintage jukebox in the corner, taking in every detail of this slice of small-town America. The whispers grew louder, a wave of excitement rippling through the room. Is that really him? What's he doing here? Should we say something? The once cozy diner now crackled with an electric mix of disbelief and anticipation. Marge, snapping out of her initial shock, smoothed her apron and took a deep breath. She stepped out from behind the counter, a welcoming smile plastered on her face despite the nervous tremor in her hands. "Welcome to Marge's," she managed, her voice only slightly shaky. Musk nodded politely, seemingly oblivious to the chaos his presence had created. He moved towards the counter with purpose, each step drawing every eye in the diner. The room held its collective breath as he approached, the air thick with questions. What would he order? Why was he here? What cosmic alignment of events had brought Elon Musk to this unassuming Minnesota diner on a rainy Tuesday? As Musk reached the counter, he paused, his hand hovering over the laminated menu. The entire diner leaned in, hearts pounding, waiting to hear what the tech mogul would say next. Elon's fingers hovered over the laminated menu, his eyes scanning the familiar diner fare. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the billionaire's next move. Doris, the veteran waitress, stood poised with her pen, her hand trembling slightly as she prepared to take the order of a lifetime. "I'll have the house special," Elon said, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "And a large coffee, black." A collective gasp rippled through the diner. The house special? A simple plate of meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans that had been on the menu since the 1950s? Nearby customers exchanged wide-eyed glances, their own meals forgotten. Doris blinked, her pen frozen above the order pad. Would you like gravy on that, Mr. Musk?" she managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Elon nodded, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Yes, please. And could I get extra green beans instead of the roll?" The request for extra vegetables sent another wave of murmurs through the diner. Sarah, the college student, furiously tapped away at her phone, no doubt updating her social media followers on every detail of the surreal encounter. In the kitchen, Mike the cook nearly dropped his spatula when Doris called out the order. "House special for Elon Musk," she stammered, her voice cracking on the name. Mike's eyes widened as he stared at the ticket, then at the ingredients in front of him. He'd made this dish 1,000 times before, but suddenly it felt like the most important meal of his life. As Elon waited for his order, the atmosphere in the diner shifted. Customers who had been frozen in shock now began to move, albeit slowly and with frequent glances in the billionaire's direction. Tom and Jerry, the 2 old friends, leaned in close, their hushed conversation punctuated by gestures toward Elon. A young boy tugged on his mother's sleeve, loudly asking, "Mom, is that the Rocket Man?" His mother shushed him, her face flushing red, as Elon turned in their direction with an amused expression. When Doris returned with his steaming plate and coffee, Elon thanked her warmly. He picked up his tray, the simple diner fare looking oddly out of place in his hands. As he turned to find a seat, every eye in the place followed his movement. The question hung in the air, unspoken but palpable. Where would Elon Musk, tech mogul and space pioneer, choose to sit in this small-town Minnesota diner? Elon's eyes swept across the diner, each table a potential landing site for his impromptu lunch mission. The patrons held their breath, wondering if they'd be chosen for this unexpected close encounter. But fate had other plans, steering Elon towards someone who had no idea their life was about to change. As Musk moved through the diner, a palpable wave of anticipation followed him. Couples scooted closer together, hoping to free up space at their tables. A group of teenagers frantically tidied their booth, tossing crumpled napkins into empty milkshake glasses. Even old Tom and Jerry, usually absorbed in their own world, sat up straighter, their argument forgotten as they watched Elon's approach. But Musk's gaze had settled on a solitary figure in the corner booth. An elderly man sat hunched over a crossword puzzle, seemingly oblivious to the commotion around him. His weathered hands gripped a pencil, brow furrowed in concentration. This was Harold, a retired engineer who had been coming to Marge's diner every day for the past 20 years. Elon slid into the booth across from Harold, who looked up, startled. Recognition dawned slowly on the old man's face, his eyes widening behind thick glasses. "Mind if I join you?" Elon asked, his voice friendly, but tinged with a hint of weariness. Harold's mouth opened and closed a few times before he managed to stammer, "Not at all, Mr. Musk. It's an honor." The diner fell silent, all eyes trained on this unlikely pair. Sarah, the college student, had long abandoned any pretense of subtlety and was now openly filming with her phone. Doris hovered nearby, coffee pot in hand, ready to swoop in at a moment's notice. Elon took a bite of his meatloaf, nodding appreciatively. "This is good," he said, gesturing with his fork. "You come here often?" Harold nodded, still looking shell-shocked. "Every day for lunch. Never thought I'd be sharing it with, well, you." As the initial shock wore off, Harold's natural curiosity began to surface. He glanced at Elon's plate, then back at the man himself. "I have to ask," he said, his voice gaining strength, "what brings a man like you to a place like this?" Elon paused, fork halfway to his mouth. A small smile played at the corners of his lips. "Sometimes," he said, "even rocket scientists need a taste of home." With that simple statement, the ice was broken. Harold leaned forward, his crossword forgotten. "Well, Mr. Musk, I may not know much about rockets, but I do know a thing or two about engineering. Did I ever tell you about the time I helped design the local hydroelectric dam?" As Harold launched into his story, Elon listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed he was genuinely engaged. The rest of the diner watched in amazement as these two men from vastly different worlds found common ground over meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Little did anyone know, this unexpected lunch conversation was about to take a turn that would change more than just Harold's afternoon. While Elon and Harold chatted, a remarkable metamorphosis was taking place. The sleepy diner had become the eye of a storm, with Musk at its center. But as the energy in the room intensified, Would this celebrity sighting remain a feel-good moment, or was trouble brewing beneath the surface? The once familiar clatter of plates and murmur of conversation had transformed into a buzz of excitement. Customers who normally kept to themselves now huddled in small groups, phones out, frantically texting friends and family. "You won't believe who's here," became the whispered refrain echoing through the diner. Doris, the veteran waitress, found herself in uncharted territory. Her usual efficiency faltered as she tried to balance her regular duties with sneaking glances at the famous guest. She nearly spilled coffee twice, something she hadn't done in years. In the kitchen, Mike the cook peered through the order window every few minutes, his curiosity getting the better of him. As word spread, a steady stream of newcomers began to trickle in. They tried to look casual, ordering coffee or pie, but their eyes kept darting to Elon's table. A few bolder patrons approached, asking for autographs or selfies. Elon, to his credit, remained gracious, signing a napkin here, posing for a quick photo there. The noise level in the diner rose steadily. Conversations that once revolved around local gossip and weather forecasts now centered on SpaceX launches and Tesla's latest innovations. Even Tom and Jerry, the diner's resident debaters, found common ground in their shared amazement at the day's turn of events. Marge, the diner's owner, watched it all unfold with a mix of excitement and anxiety. She dreamed of her little place becoming famous, but not quite like this. As she saw Doris struggling to keep up with the influx of customers, Marge rolled up her sleeves and stepped out from behind the counter. She may not be used to serving celebrities, but she knew how to run a diner. Meanwhile, Elon and Harold's conversation deepened. The initial awkwardness had faded, replaced by a genuine exchange of ideas. Harold's eyes lit up as he described his work on the local dam, his hands moving animatedly. Elon leaned in, asking questions that showed he was truly listening. As the afternoon wore on, something shifted in Elon's expression. The weariness that had clung to him when he first entered the diner seemed to lift. He reached for his phone, tapped out a quick message, then turned back to Harold with renewed interest. "You know," Elon said, lowering his voice, "I've been working on something that might interest you." Harold leaned in closer, unaware that he was about to become privy to information that could change everything. Elon's eyes darted around the room, ensuring no one else could hear. He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to share. What secret could be so monumental that even Elon Musk hesitated to speak it aloud? The answer would leave Harold questioning everything he thought he knew about the future of technology. Leaning in close, Elon's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Harold, what I'm about to tell you, it's not public knowledge yet, but I think you'll appreciate it." Harold nodded, his eyes wide with anticipation. Elon continued, "We've made a breakthrough in neural interface technology. We're not just talking about controlling devices with your mind anymore. We're on the verge of direct brain-to-brain communication." Harold's jaw dropped. He blinked rapidly, trying to process the information. "You mean telepathy?" he whispered back, his voice trembling with a mix of excitement and disbelief. Elon nodded, a glimmer in his eye. "Essentially, yes, but it's more than that. Imagine sharing complex ideas, memories, even emotions instantly. It could revolutionize everything from education to mental health treatment." At a nearby table, Sarah's hand froze mid-type on her phone. She strained to hear, catching fragments of words like neural and telepathy. Her eyes widened, and she looked around frantically, wondering if anyone else had heard. Tom and Jerry, usually absorbed in their own debates, fell silent. They pretended to be deeply interested in their coffee cups, all the while angling their ears towards Elon's booth. As Elon continued to explain the intricacies of the technology, Harold's expression shifted from shock to wonder. He leaned forward, hanging on every word, occasionally interjecting with questions that showed his engineering background. Elon's body language changed as he spoke. The weariness that had clung to him earlier melted away, replaced by an infectious enthusiasm. His hands moved animatedly as he described the potential applications, his eyes alight with the possibilities. Doris, passing by with a coffee pot, nearly stumbled as she caught a snippet of the conversation. She moved slower, refilling mugs at nearby tables with painstaking care, trying to linger within earshot. As Elon finished sharing the details, he sat back, watching Harold's reaction carefully. The old engineer's mind was clearly racing, connecting dots and seeing implications that even Elon might not have considered. Harold opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Elon's phone buzzed insistently. A shadow passed over Elon's face as he glanced at the screen. He looked up at Harold, conflict clear in his eyes. "I shouldn't have said anything," he muttered, more to himself than to Harold. "If this gets out before we're ready." The air in the diner seemed to crackle with tension. What would happen if word of this revolutionary technology leaked prematurely? And how would it change the trajectory of Elon's ambitious plans for the future of humanity? Just when it seemed Elon Musk's impromptu visit couldn't get any more extraordinary, he stood up from his booth. The other diners held their breath, sensing the encounter was about to end. Little did they know, Elon's most remarkable act was yet to come, one that would be talked about in this small Minnesota town for years to come. Elon glanced at his watch, a subtle gesture that sent a ripple of disappointment through the diner. Patrons exchanged worried looks, realizing their brush with fame might be drawing to a close. Sarah, the college student, frantically tapped away at her phone, determined to capture every last moment. As Elon made his way to the counter, the diner fell into an expectant hush. What would the billionaire do before he left? Would he simply pay and walk out, or did he have one last surprise up his sleeve? Approaching Marge at the register, Elon pulled out his wallet, but instead of simply settling his bill, he leaned in and spoke quietly to the diner owner. Marge's eyes widened, and she clasped a hand to her mouth in disbelief. Elon turned to address the room, his voice carrying clearly in the silent diner. "I'd like to pay for everyone's meal today," he announced, "and leave a little something extra for this wonderful staff." The diner erupted in gasps and exclamations. Doris, the veteran waitress, nearly dropped her coffee pot in shock. Mike poked his head out from the kitchen, mouth agape. The patrons looked at each other in amazement, hardly able to believe what they'd just heard. But Elon wasn't finished. He turned back to Marge, handing her a business card. "And Harold," he said, nodding to his lunch companion, "I'd like you to give him my personal email. I think we have more to discuss about that damn project of his." Harold, still seated at the booth, looked as if he might faint. Tom and Jerry, the diner's resident debaters, for once found themselves speechless. As the reality of Elon's gesture sank in, the mood in the diner shifted dramatically. The initial shock gave way to a wave of joy and excitement. Strangers turned to each other, sharing looks of delight and disbelief. A spontaneous round of applause broke out, filling the small space with a thunderous show of appreciation. Elon accepted the applause with a modest nod, then made his way to the door. As he reached for the handle, he turned back one last time. "Thanks for the great meal, and even better company," he said, his eyes twinkling. "I have a feeling I'll be back." With that, Elon Musk stepped out into the Minnesota afternoon, leaving behind a diner forever changed by his unexpected visit. As the door closed behind him, the buzz of excited conversation filled the air, a chorus of voices all asking the same question. Did that really just happen? The bell above the door chimed as Elon Musk stepped out, leaving behind a diner buzzing with excitement. For a moment, everyone sat in stunned silence, as if waiting for Musk to reappear and reveal it had all been an elaborate prank. Then, like a dam bursting, the room erupted into a cacophony of voices. "Did that really just happen?" Tom asked Jerry, his coffee forgotten and growing cold. Jerry shook his head in disbelief. "I don't know, but I think I just watched Elon Musk eat meatloaf." Across the diner, phones buzzed and chimed as patrons rushed to share their unexpected encounter with the world. Sarah, the college student, furiously typed away, her fingers flying over her phone's keyboard. "How long was he even here?" someone called out. Doris, still clutching her coffee pot, glanced at the clock. "About an hour and 15 minutes, she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Felt like 5 minutes and 5 years all at once." In the kitchen, Mike peered out, his eyes wide. "I cooked for Elon Musk," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "I cooked meatloaf for Elon Musk." The staff moved in a daze, clearing Musk's table with reverent care. Doris carefully wrapped the napkin he'd used in plastic, tucking it away as a memento. Outside, a small crowd had begun to gather. Word spread quickly in the small town, and curious onlookers pressed their faces against the diner's windows, hoping for a glimpse of the celebrity who'd graced their community. Marge, the owner, stood behind the counter, her mind racing. She looked at the business card Musk had handed her, then at the suddenly bustling diner. In just over an hour, her quiet establishment had transformed into the most talked-about spot in town. As if on cue, a local news van pulled up outside. A reporter and cameraman rushed in, scanning the room for the best angle to capture this unexpected story. Marge's phone buzzed. It was her daughter, calling from 2 states away. "Mom, you're trending on Twitter. Elon at Marge's is blowing up." The diner owner blinked, trying to process this new reality. She looked around at her staff, at the excited customers, at the growing crowd outside. For a moment, she felt overwhelmed. Then, straightening her apron, she took a deep breath. "All right, folks," she called out, her voice steady and warm. "Looks like we might be in for some busy days ahead. But don't you worry. Famous visitors or not, we'll keep serving up the best comfort food in Minnesota." As the afternoon wore on, the diner hummed with a new energy. Regular customers mingled with curious newcomers, all sharing their part in the day Elon Musk came to town. And in the corner booth, Harold sat quietly, clutching Musk's email address, wondering how his life might change in the days to come. A week after Elon Musk's surprise visit, Marge's diner looked nothing like it did before. The same neon sign flickered outside, but inside, a transformation was underway. What happened in those 7 days that turned a quiet local eatery into the talk of the state? The once sleepy diner now buzzed with activity from open to close. Regulars found themselves rubbing elbows with out-of-towners, all hoping to sit in Elon's booth. Doris, the veteran waitress, now sported a SpaceX pin on her apron, a gift from a customer who worked for the company. She moved between tables with a newfound spring in her step, sharing the story of Musk's visit with wide-eyed patrons. Mike, the cook, had his hands full keeping up with the surge in orders. The Musk special, his take on the meatloaf Elon had enjoyed, quickly became the most requested item on the menu. He'd even started experimenting with plant-based versions, inspired by conversations overheard from the new tech-savvy crowd. The most significant change, however, was in the atmosphere. The diner had become a hub of innovation talk and big dreams. Students from the local community college held study groups there, their tables covered in textbooks and laptops. Retired engineers like Harold became regular fixtures, sharing stories and debating the latest tech news. Social media continued to buzz about Darsh Elon at Marge's. The diner's Instagram followers had skyrocketed, with people from around the world leaving comments and asking when Elon might return. Local news stations ran follow-up stories, interviewing Marge about the impact on her business and the community. But not all changes were expected or welcome. The sudden influx of customers strained the small staff, and Marge found herself working longer hours than ever before. Some longtime patrons grumbled about the noise and the difficulty in finding their usual seats. The town itself grappled with increased traffic and parking issues as curious visitors flocked to see the now famous diner. Perhaps the most surprising development came from Harold. After his conversation with Musk, he'd been inspired to dust off old engineering projects. With Elon's encouragement and connections, Harold now led a small team working on improving the efficiency of the local dam. His eyes sparkled with renewed purpose every time he entered the diner. As Marge locked up one evening, she paused to look around her transformed restaurant. The booths that once held quiet conversations now echoed with dreams of space travel and sustainable energy. She realized that Elon Musk hadn't just changed her diner. He'd awakened a sense of possibility in the entire town. A brief encounter had indeed changed everything, reminding everyone that inspiration can strike anywhere, even over a plate of homemade meatloaf in a small Minnesota diner. As the sun set on that unforgettable day in Minnesota, the ripples of Elon Musk's visit continued to spread. What began as a simple lunch order transformed into a catalyst for change, touching lives far beyond the diner's walls. From Harold's renewed sense of purpose to the town's awakened spirit of innovation, a single unexpected encounter reshaped an entire community. Musk's gesture of generosity, his genuine interest in Harold's ideas, and the secrets he shared over meatloaf all combined to create a moment that would be talked about for years to come. It was a reminder that even in our hyper-connected world, there's still magic in face-to-face interactions and shared meals. As the story of Elon at Marge's faded from headlines, one question lingered. In a world where celebrity encounters are often carefully staged, what power lies in these rare, unscripted moments of connection? Perhaps the answer was there all along, hidden in the steam rising from a cup of diner coffee.